Dr. Lawrence Bennett was the kind of surgeon who believed God had given him the gift of healing. He also believed God had given him the wisdom to decide who deserved that healing and who didn't. 20 years ago, that belief cost a 7-year-old girl her life. The emergency room at Mercy Medical Center was in chaos that July night in 2003. Dr. Bennett, chief of cardiothoracic surgery, was reviewing charts when a black man in work clothes burst through the doors, carrying a small girl in his arms. "Please, my daughter, something's wrong with her heart." Marcus Johnson, a construction worker, had rushed home from his night shift to find his daughter Kenya collapsed on the floor, her lips turning blue. His wife had died in childbirth, and Kenya was all he had left. The ER doctor, a young resident named Sarah Chen, quickly assessed the situation. "She's in heart failure. We need cardio up here now." Dr. Bennett arrived, took one look at the chart, and his face hardened. "No insurance?" I lost my job last month. The insurance lapsed, but please, I'll pay whatever it costs. I'll work for the rest of my life. This child needs immediate surgery, a valve replacement. That's a $200,000 procedure." Bennett crossed his arms. "We can stabilize her and transfer her to County General." "County's an hour away. She doesn't have an hour," Dr. Chen protested. "Dr. Bennett, she'll die if we don't operate now." Then perhaps her father should have prioritized keeping his insurance instead of whatever else he spent his money on. Marcus felt his world crumbling. "Please, she's 7 years old. She's all I have. I'm begging you." Dr. Bennett looked at this man, poor, black, desperate, and saw only someone who hadn't earned his help. "I'm sorry. Hospital policy. Transfer her to county. Hospital policy allows emergency life-saving procedures." Dr. Chen's voice rose. "You're the chief of surgery. You can authorize this, and I'm choosing not to. Get her stabilized for transport." Kenya Johnson died in the ambulance 17 minutes later, her heart giving out before they reached County General. Marcus held her small hand the entire time, watching the life drain from his only child's eyes while the EMTs worked frantically. At the hospital, after they pronounced her dead, Marcus had collapsed, not with tears, with a rage so profound it turned to ice. Her name was Kenya, he'd told Dr. Bennett, who'd been legally required to be present for the death notification. Kenya Marie Johnson. She loved butterflies. She wanted to be a teacher, and you let her die because we're poor and black. I made a difficult medical decision. You made a choice, and someday you'll understand what you took from me." It had sounded like a threat. Hospital security had escorted Marcus out. Dr. Bennett had filed a restraining order, and then he'd forgotten about Kenya Johnson and her father, the way he'd forgotten about all the other poor patients he'd turned away over his 30-year career. But Marcus Johnson never forgot. He couldn't. Every morning for 20 years, he woke up in a house too quiet, made breakfast for one, and remembered his daughter's last words. "Daddy, my chest hurts." 20 years later, Dr. Lawrence Bennett was 72 years old, wealthy, respected, and dying. His own heart, the organ he'd spent his career repairing in others, was failing. Congestive heart failure, complicated by coronary artery disease. He'd tried medications, procedures, lifestyle changes. Nothing worked. He needed a transplant. Dr. Bennett, his cardiologist, Dr. Patricia Walsh, delivered the news with the careful neutrality of someone giving bad news to a colleague. "Your heart function is down to 15%. Without a transplant, you have maybe 6 months. Put me on the list." "You're already on it. But I have to be honest, you're 72. You're not a priority recipient. Younger patients, patients with better long-term prognosis, they'll get precedence." "I've spent 40 years saving lives. I've done over 3,000 heart surgeries." "I know, but the system doesn't care about that. It cares about statistics, survival rates, quality of life years." Dr. Walsh paused. "I'm sorry, Lawrence. All we can do is wait and hope." Dr. Bennett went home to his mansion in the suburbs, his wife of 30 years, his 2 successful children who lived across the country and barely called, and for the first time in his life, he understood what it meant to be powerless. To need something desperately and be told you weren't priority enough. To have money, status, and connections, and still face the reality that they might not be enough. The irony was completely lost on him. 6 months passed. Dr. Bennett's condition deteriorated. He needed oxygen. He couldn't walk upstairs. He spent most days in a recliner, watching TV, waiting for his phone to ring with news of a donor heart. Meanwhile, across the city, Marcus Johnson was living a different kind of waiting. After Kenya's death, Marcus had spent 5 years in darkness, depression, rage, alcohol. He'd lost his home, his health, nearly his sanity. But then he'd found a support group for parents who'd lost children to medical negligence, and in that group, he'd found purpose. He'd gone back to school, earned his degree, become a social worker specializing in medical advocacy for poor families. He'd spent 15 years helping other families navigate the system that had failed his daughter, making sure no other child died because a doctor decided they weren't worth saving. And he'd never stopped thinking about Dr. Lawrence Bennett. Marcus had followed Bennett's career from a distance, watched him win awards, give speeches, accept honors. The man had never faced consequences for Kenya's death, never even acknowledged it publicly, just continued his career as if her life and death meant nothing. Now, Marcus stood outside Mercy Medical Center, the same hospital where his daughter had died, preparing for a meeting with the hospital's new administration. They wanted to consult with him about reforming their charity care policies. Progress. Painful, slow progress. But progress nonetheless. He never expected to see Dr. Lawrence Bennett walking, barely walking, out of the cardiac clinic. Marcus recognized him instantly, even though 20 years had aged the doctor considerably. But that face, the face that had looked at his dying daughter and seen only a financial liability, that face was burned into Marcus's memory forever. Bennett didn't see him. He was too focused on getting to his car, on managing his oxygen tank, on surviving another day. Marcus stood frozen, watching his daughter's killer struggle with the very organ Kenya's had needed help with. The symmetry was almost poetic. Almost. That night, Marcus couldn't sleep. He kept seeing Bennett's face, kept thinking about karma, kept wondering if the universe had finally noticed. His phone rang at 3:47 a.m., the hospital. "Mr. Johnson? This is Mercy Medical Center Transplant Coordination. There's been an accident. A young woman, brain dead but a registered organ donor. She's a match for your daughter." Marcus's blood ran cold. "What?" "Your daughter, Aaliyah Johnson. She's been on the heart transplant list for 6 months. We have a donor heart. We need to operate immediately." "I don't have a daughter. My daughter died 20 years ago." Silence on the other end. I'm so sorry. There must be a mistake in our system. I apologize for disturbing you." After she hung up, Marcus stared at his phone. Then, slowly, he opened his laptop and did something he never did. He searched his own name in the hospital database and found it. A registration error from 20 years ago, never corrected. Kenya Marie Johnson, marked as active patient instead of deceased. And somehow, in the system's automation, she'd been placed on the heart transplant list when Bennett's name was entered. The hospital had been waiting to give Kenya a new heart for 6 months. Kenya, who'd been dead for 20 years because Dr. Bennett decided she wasn't worth saving. Marcus sat in his dark apartment staring at the error, thinking about the cruel irony of the universe. Then his phone rang again. Different number. "Marcus Johnson?" "Yes?" "This is Dr. Patricia Walsh at Mercy Medical. I'm the transplant coordinator. I need to speak with you about something urgent. It's about Dr. Lawrence Bennett." They met in a 24-hour diner near the hospital. Dr. Walsh looked exhausted, her face etched with ethical dilemma. "I shouldn't be telling you this," she began. "But 20 years ago, you filed a complaint about Dr. Bennett, about your daughter Kenya. He let her die." "I know. I was a resident that night. I was in the ER. I saw what he did." Dr. Walsh's voice was heavy. "I've carried that guilt for 20 years. I should have done more. I should have challenged him harder. Why are you telling me this now?" "Because Dr. Bennett needs a heart transplant. He's been on the list for 6 months, and tonight a donor heart became available. Perfect match. Marcus felt sick. You're giving him a heart." "That's the problem. The donor is a 27-year-old woman, car accident, registered organ donor. Her heart is going to save someone's life." Dr. Walsh leaned forward. "But I need to tell you who she was." "Why would I care?" Because her name was Aaliyah Thompson. She was a social worker. She spent her career helping poor families access medical care. She volunteered at free clinics. She advocated for healthcare reform. Dr. Walsh pulled out her phone, showed Marcus a photo. Marcus's breath caught. The young woman in the photo could have been Kenya. Same bright smile, same warm eyes, same spirit of someone who wanted to make the world better. She listed you in her files, Dr. Walsh continued. Said you were her inspiration, that she became a social worker because of your advocacy work after your daughter's death. I never met her, but your story touched her. And now her heart is going to save Dr. Lawrence Bennett. The man who let your daughter die is going to live because someone who admired your work died. Marcus felt the universe closing in around him, tightening into a noose of irony. Why are you telling me this? Because I need to know, if you object, if you have any legal standing to prevent this transplant. Bennett doesn't know about the connection. He doesn't even remember your daughter's name. Dr. Walsh's eyes were pleading. I've spent 20 years watching Bennett get away with what he did. And I'm about to give him another 20 years of life using the heart of someone who fought for everything he destroyed. Can you stop it? Only if there's a legal or ethical reason, family objection, conflict of interest, something. Marcus thought about Kenya, about Aaliyah, about Dr. Bennett living another 20 years, never knowing, never paying for what he'd done. And he thought about what Kenya would have wanted, what Aaliyah clearly wanted, or she wouldn't have checked that organ donor box. Do the surgery, Marcus said quietly. What? Give him the heart. Let him live. Marcus stood up. But tell him everything. Tell him whose heart it is. Tell him about Aaliyah. Tell him about Kenya. Make him live with it. Dr. Walsh stared at him. That's not protocol. I don't care about protocol. Bennett gets to live, but he doesn't get to forget. Not this time. The surgery was scheduled for dawn. Dr. Patricia Walsh stood in the operating room, preparing to give Dr. Lawrence Bennett a heart that carried more weight than he could possibly imagine. Bennett was wheeled in, sedated but conscious enough for pre-op protocols. Dr. Walsh stood beside his gurney. Dr. Bennett, before we proceed, there's something you need to know about your donor. I don't need details. Just do the surgery. Her name was Aaliyah Thompson. She was 27, a social worker who spent her life helping poor families access health care. Bennett's eyes were already closing from the anesthesia. That's nice. She was inspired by a man named Marcus Johnson. Do you remember that name? Something flickered behind Bennett's drugged eyes. Johnson? Marcus Johnson. His daughter Kenya died 20 years ago because you refused to operate on her. Aaliyah spent her career making sure no other child died the way Kenya did, and now her heart is going to save your life. Bennett tried to speak, but the anesthesia pulled him under. The surgery took 9 hours. It was flawless. Aaliyah Thompson's young, healthy heart began beating in Dr. Lawrence Bennett's chest, pumping blood, sustaining life, giving him years he'd denied to a 7-year-old girl 2 decades earlier. Bennett woke up 3 days later in the ICU. The first thing he felt was his heartbeat, strong, steady, someone else's rhythm in his chest. The second thing he saw was Dr. Walsh standing beside his bed. The surgery was successful. Your new heart is functioning perfectly. Whose heart? Aaliyah Thompson's. I told you before surgery. Do you remember? Bennett's mind was foggy, but pieces were coming back. Johnson. You said something about Johnson. Dr. Walsh pulled up a chair. 20 years ago, you refused to operate on a 7-year-old girl named Kenya Johnson. She died because you said her family couldn't pay. Her father, Marcus Johnson, became a medical advocate. He inspired dozens of people, including Aaliyah Thompson, to fight for health care justice. And now, Aaliyah's heart is keeping you alive. The heart monitor began beeping faster as Bennett's anxiety spiked. That's not, I made a medical decision. You made a choice, and now you're living with the consequences, literally. Dr. Walsh stood. Marcus Johnson knows. He could have stopped this transplant, but he chose to let you live. I thought you should know that. She left Bennett alone with his new heart and the weight of 20 years of karma. Bennett's recovery was medically perfect but psychologically devastating. Every heartbeat reminded him of Aaliyah Thompson. Every breath reminded him of Kenya Johnson. He researched both women obsessively from his hospital bed. Aaliyah's obituary described a woman who'd helped over 200 families navigate medical crises, who'd volunteered at free clinics, who'd fought insurance companies and hospital administrators to ensure poor patients received care. Everything Bennett had never been. Kenya's death certificate was harder to find, but he found it. Cause of death, heart failure, could have been prevented with timely surgical intervention, his choice, his responsibility. Bennett's wife visited daily, relieved he'd survived. His children called, happy their father would live. But Bennett couldn't feel their joy. He could only feel the steady rhythm of Aaliyah's heart beating in his chest, pumping blood he didn't deserve. 2 weeks after surgery, Bennett was discharged. Dr. Walsh gave him final instructions. You'll need lifelong immunosuppressants, regular monitoring, no strenuous activity for 6 months. She paused. And you should know, Marcus Johnson asked to be notified when you were released. He wants to speak with you. I can't face him. You're alive because of his mercy. The least you can do is listen. They met in a park near the hospital. Bennett, still weak from surgery, sat on a bench. Marcus Johnson approached slowly, studying the man who'd killed his daughter. You look different, Marcus said. 20 years, surgery, a new heart. Bennett couldn't meet his eyes. I don't remember you. From that night. I'm sorry. Of course you don't. We were just another poor black family to you, forgettable. Mr. Johnson, do you know what it's like? Marcus's voice was steady, but Bennett could hear the pain underneath. To hold your child while she dies? To know that she'd be alive if someone had just cared enough to help? I can't imagine. No, you can't. Because you never tried. Marcus sat down on the bench, keeping distance between them. Kenya was 7. She loved butterflies. She'd collect them in a journal, pictures, facts, drawings. She wanted to be a teacher. Did you know that? No. Of course not. You didn't ask. You saw no insurance and decided she wasn't worth knowing. Marcus looked at Bennett's chest, where Aaliyah's heart was beating. How does it feel? Having her heart? Wrong. It feels wrong. Good. It should. Marcus pulled out a photo from his wallet, young Kenya smiling, holding a butterfly on her finger. I'm going to tell you something, Dr. Bennett. I hated you for 20 years, dreamed about revenge, about you suffering the way Kenya suffered. I understand. Let me finish. I hated you. But Aaliyah Thompson didn't. She read about Kenya's case when she was in college. It inspired her to become a social worker, to help families like mine. She spent 10 years making the world better because my daughter's death mattered to her. Marcus put the photo away. When Dr. Walsh told me Aaliyah's heart was going to you, I wanted to stop it. Wanted you to die the way Kenya died, desperate, scared, knowing help was available but denied. Bennett felt tears on his face. Why didn't you? Because that's not who Aaliyah was. She checked that organ donor box because she believed in saving lives. All lives, even lives like yours. Marcus finally looked at Bennett directly. So you get to live. But you don't get to forget. Every heartbeat is Aaliyah. Every breath is Kenya. You carry them with you now, literally. What do you want from me? I want you to be better. I want you to spend whatever time that heart gives you becoming the doctor you should have been 20 years ago. Marcus stood up. Aaliyah saved over 200 families. Can you even count how many you turned away? Bennett couldn't answer. I didn't think so. Marcus started to walk away, then turned back. One more thing. Aaliyah's family wants to meet you. They want to know the person their daughter saved. I told them about Kenya. They want to meet me, too. There's a memorial service next month. You should come. I can't. Yes, you can. Aaliyah's heart is strong enough. The memorial service was held in a community center in Aaliyah's neighborhood. Poor, diverse, full of the people Bennett had spent his career avoiding. Over 300 people attended. Families Aaliyah had helped, co-workers, friends, people whose lives she'd touched. Bennett sat in the back, invisible, overwhelmed. Marcus sat in the front with Aaliyah's mother, Grace Thompson, a woman who'd lost her daughter but chose to celebrate her life by meeting the man that life had saved. After the service, Grace approached Bennett. She was small, dignified, with Aaliyah's same warm eyes. "Dr. Bennett, I'm Grace Thompson." "Mrs. Thompson, I'm so sorry." "My daughter believed in second chances. She believed people could change." Grace placed her hand on Bennett's chest over his heart, her daughter's heart. "She's still saving lives. Even now, don't waste it." Bennett broke down completely. 20 years of arrogance, of seeing patients as numbers, of playing God with other people's lives, all of it crumbled under the gentle weight of this mother's forgiveness. "I don't deserve this," he whispered. "None of us deserve grace. That's why it's called grace." Grace squeezed his hand. "My daughter is keeping you alive. Honor that. Be worthy of it." 6 months after the transplant, Dr. Lawrence Bennett did something he'd never done in 40 years of medicine. He apologized. The medical board hearing was crowded with families he'd turned away over the years. Poor families, immigrant families, families of color, families he'd deemed not worth his skill. "My name is Dr. Lawrence Bennett. For 40 years I practiced medicine. But I didn't practice healing. I practiced judgment. I decided who deserved my help based on insurance, income, skin color. I played God with people's lives and convinced myself it was good medicine." He placed his hand over his heart. 6 months ago, I received a heart transplant. The donor was Aaliyah Thompson, a woman who spent her life helping the people I rejected. And Aaliyah was inspired by Marcus Johnson, whose daughter I let die 20 years ago. Gasps rippled through the room. Marcus sat in the front row, his face unreadable. "I can't undo the harm I caused. I can't bring back Kenya Johnson or the others who died because I refused to help, but I can spend whatever time this heart gives me being better, being worthy of the second chance I don't deserve." Bennett looked directly at Marcus. "I'm sorry. It's not enough. It will never be enough, but it's all I have." The room was silent. Then Marcus stood and walked to the front. He faced Bennett for a long moment before speaking. "My daughter Kenya would be 27 now. Aaliyah's age. Maybe they would have been friends. Maybe Kenya would have become a teacher like she dreamed. Maybe." His voice broke. "Maybe doesn't matter. She's gone. But Aaliyah's heart is still beating. And if that heart can turn you into the doctor Kenya needed 20 years ago, then maybe her death meant something." Marcus extended his hand. Bennett took it. The audience watched two men, one who'd lost everything, one who'd gained everything and lost his soul, find something like peace in the space between revenge and redemption. 2 years after receiving Aaliyah's heart, Dr. Lawrence Bennett stood in the lobby of a newly opened free clinic in the neighborhood where Kenya Johnson had lived. The clinic's name, etched in glass above the entrance, read, "Kenya and Aaliyah Community Health Center." Bennett had funded it with his retirement savings. Marcus Johnson ran it, and Grace Thompson served on the board of directors. 3 people bound by loss, organ donation, and the painful journey toward redemption. "We're ready for the ribbon cutting," Marcus said, approaching Bennett. Their relationship was complicated. Not quite friendship, but something deeper, a partnership forged in tragedy. Outside, over 200 people gathered, families from the neighborhood, former patients of Aaliyah's, members of the medical community, and media, because the story of a racist doctor reformed by the heart of the woman inspired by his victim had captured national attention. Bennett stepped to the microphone, his hand unconsciously resting over his chest where Aaliyah's heart beat steadily. 2 years ago, I was dying. I needed a heart transplant. I got one, but what I received was much more than an organ. I received a mirror that forced me to see who I'd become." He paused, looking at Marcus. 20 years ago, I let a 7-year-old girl named Kenya Johnson die because I valued money over life. I've spent my career making those calculations, deciding who deserved healing based on insurance cards and bank accounts." The crowd was silent. Aaliyah Thompson spent her life undoing the harm people like me caused, and when she died, her heart saved the last person who deserved it, me. But she taught me something. Redemption isn't about deserving. It's about choosing differently. Bennett gestured to the clinic. This building can't bring back Kenya or Aaliyah, but it can honor them by making sure no parent ever hears we can't help you because they're poor. No child ever dies because someone like me decides they're not worth saving. He cut the ribbon alongside Marcus and Grace. As people streamed into the clinic for tours, a young black girl, maybe 7 years old, approached Bennett. "Are you the doctor with the lady's heart?" Bennett knelt to her level. "Yes, I am. My mama says you used to be mean, but now you're nice because of the heart. Is that true?" "Your mama's partly right. The heart helped me see clearly, but I had to choose to change. The heart just gave me time to do it." The girl considered this. "Can you listen to it?" "The heart?" Bennett placed his stethoscope on his chest, then offered the earpieces to the girl. Her eyes widened as she heard the steady rhythm. "That's Aaliyah's heart keeping me alive, and Kenya's memory keeping me honest." The clinic saw 50 patients in its first week, all uninsured or underinsured, all people who'd been turned away from other facilities. Bennett volunteered 3 days a week, doing what he should have done his entire career, healing without judgment. One afternoon, a familiar face appeared in his examination room. Dr. Sarah Chen, the resident who'd begged him to save Kenya 20 years ago. "Dr. Bennett, I heard you were here." "Dr. Chen, you're not a resident anymore." "No, I'm chief of emergency medicine at Mercy now. I've been following your work here. It's impressive. It's 20 years too late." "Maybe. But it's still important." Dr. Chen sat down. "I need to tell you something. I've carried guilt about Kenya for 2 decades. I should have done more, should have fought harder. You tried. I didn't listen. That's why I'm here. We're implementing new protocols at Mercy. No patient can be denied emergency care due to insurance status. It's called the Kenya Johnson Memorial Protocol." Dr. Chen smiled. "Marcus helped us design it, and we want you to help train our doctors on recognizing their own biases." Bennett felt Aaliyah's heart skip. "Me? Train doctors? Who better than someone who learned the hardest way? You can teach them what happens when prejudice meets power. Make sure they never become who you were." 6 months later, Bennett was teaching at 3 hospitals and 2 medical schools. His lectures, titled "The Hearts We Break, Medical Bias and Redemption," were brutally honest about his failures. "I killed Kenya Johnson," he'd say to rooms full of medical students. "Not with a scalpel, with prejudice. I looked at a dying child and saw only her father's empty bank account, and I've spent every day since learning to see differently." Students would ask, "How do we avoid becoming like you were?" Remember that every patient is someone's Kenya, someone's whole world, and your job isn't to judge if they deserve healing, it's to provide it. One student, a young black woman, approached after class. "Dr. Bennett, I'm pre-med because of your story, not in spite of it, because of it. You prove people can change." Bennett thought about Aaliyah, who'd entered medicine for the same reason, the ripples of one death spreading across decades, touching hundreds of lives. On the 3rd anniversary of his transplant, Bennett attended the annual memorial for organ donors at Mercy Hospital. Grace Thompson was there, as always. They'd become unlikely friends, bound by Aaliyah's gift. "How are you feeling?" Grace asked. "Physically?" "Perfect. Aaliyah's heart is strong." "Emotionally?" Bennett smiled sadly. "I'm learning to live with what I did. Some days are harder than others. Aaliyah would be proud of you. I don't know about that, but I hope I'm becoming worthy of her sacrifice." They stood together at the memorial wall, where Aaliyah's name was engraved among hundreds of donors. Bennett placed his hand over his heart. Her heart. "I think about her every day. Every heartbeat is a reminder of what she gave me, what I didn't deserve. None of us deserve grace, Dr. Bennett. That's what makes it grace." Grace squeezed his hand. "My daughter believed in second chances. She believed people were worth saving, even when they didn't believe it themselves. She saved more than my life. She saved who I am. Marcus found them there, standing before his daughters in Aaliyah's names. The clinic treated its 10,000th patient yesterday," Marcus said. "All free or sliding scale. No one turned away. Kenya would be proud." Bennett said quietly. She would. Marcus paused. You know, I spent 20 years hating you, imagining revenge, hoping you'd suffer the way she suffered. I understand. Let me finish. When Dr. Walsh told me Aaliyah's heart was going to you, I wanted to stop it. But then I thought about Kenya, about what she'd want. And I realized she'd want that heart to save a life. Any life. Even yours. Marcus looked at Bennett. You're not forgiven. I'm not sure I can forgive you, but you're redeemed. There's a difference. I'll take redemption. It's more than I deserve. The three of them stood together. The father who'd lost his daughter to prejudice, the mother who'd lost her daughter to fate, and the doctor who'd been saved by both their children, finding something like peace in the space between justice and mercy. 5 years after the transplant, Dr. Lawrence Bennett published a book, Borrowed Hearts, A Surgeon's Journey from Prejudice to Redemption. All proceeds went to the Kenya and Aaliyah Clinic. The book became required reading in medical schools nationwide. Bennett was 77 now, healthy, active, still volunteering. Aaliyah's heart beat strong. And every day, he honored her memory and Kenya's loss by being the doctor he should have been 40 years earlier. He'd never forget what he'd done. He'd never stop working to make amends. But he'd learned that transformation is possible, even for those who think they're beyond redemption. Because sometimes the hearts we break become the hearts that save us. And sometimes the only way to heal the wounds we've caused is to spend the rest of our lives being worthy of the second chance we don't deserve. If this story moved you, remember that organ donation saves lives, but so does compassion. Kenya Johnson died because a doctor decided she wasn't worth saving. Aaliyah Thompson died giving life to someone who didn't deserve it. Both taught us that healing requires more than medical skill. It requires seeing every patient as fully human, regardless of their insurance, their income, or their skin color. Dr. Bennett learned this lesson 20 years too late, but he spent the rest of his life making sure other doctors learned it in time. That's not redemption, that's responsibility. And it's what we owe to every Kenya and every Aaliyah whose lives deserve our best, not our judgment.